Welcome to the show, homies. Today we've got answers on what to do when you have an appraisal issue when you're buying a home. We also talk about how to buy a home when you're still a grad student. And then we've got some really interesting information about how being a homeowner means that you have so much more control that you can feel incredible stability that you never knew was possible. How do we get the answers to all these questions? From Declan and Bailey. And Bailey said, and I quote, she thought buying a home was just for rich people. But after going through the last lease ever process and talking to a unicorn agent, take a listen to all the exciting things that happened to them. Play the music.
How to Buy a Home educates, protects, and connects first-time homebuyers to local qualified realtors specifically for first-time buyers. Whether you're looking for DIY information or personal step-by-step guidance, How to Buy a Home is your #1 resource for first-time homebuyers.
All right, homies, got an exciting episode for you today because I've got an interview with some buyers that closed in October. We're actually recording this today, the day before the Super Bowl here in February, so they've had a chance to settle in. This is Declan and Bailey. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Let's get the full story. You guys closed in October. How was your holiday time? That's the important part. Did you survive the holidays as a new homeowner?
We did. So I actually am from Texas. So I went home to be with my family for about a week. Bailey was here holding down the fort.
Yeah, I was initially afraid to be here by myself, but luckily we looked into getting a good security system, so it was good.
That's one thing in an apartment we didn't really have to worry too much about it because we were inside of a building that had like a secure, like fob access. So one of those homeowner expenses that we just decided to bite the bullet and take on.
But that's a really great point. I'm so glad that you brought that up because, yeah, a lot of times you're coming from, especially with fob or a gate or whatever it is. Bailey, are you from the area or where are you from?
I grew up in Delaware, but we met when I was living in New England in Massachusetts. And then we both moved down to Virginia together, moving into that apartment in Virginia together.
I know there's some people thinking this. Now, were you scared just because, justifiably so, you're a single woman alone in a big home, or because you guys moved to a super sketchy part of DC?
Our area is not, I don't think our area is sketchy. We actually moved down to Fredericksburg. So,
oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So we went outside of the big city.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was definitely just being, single in the house with just the cat. We also have a sunroom that has a door to the outside that is right off of our bedroom. So my imagination's always going wild thinking about people having access to it.
The cat wasn't enough protection?
He likes to attack, but in a playful way, unfortunately.
Well, that's great. That's a really great tip. I remember in my 20s living in apartment life, having my eyes opened immediately just with everything, talking to my single girlfriends, and just realizing everything from shopping to parking and opening the garage and coming home. It's a whole different mindset. Fortunately, today, there are a lot of great security systems that are simple and easy, and you can app them right there on your phone. So this was in the Virginia area, Fairfield, you said. Now, I went back and I looked at our notes. How long have you guys been thinking about this home buying process?
So I started thinking about it, I would say kind of during COVID. I started consuming a lot more personal finance content. And actually, the way I discovered How to Buy a Home was from the Bad with Money podcast with Gabe Dunn.
Yes.
Somebody turned me on to that, and I just kind of went down a rabbit hole of personal finance stuff, and I'm glad it worked out. But I think we kind of decided once we moved that we didn't want to be living in an apartment long term. I don't know if you and I talked about it too much before we moved. We were just kind of like, let's get, let's go through this transition before we try to, do any other big moves. But
yeah, I honestly never really thought about it. It was never something that I thought that I could do. So I didn't start thinking about it seriously until we had already moved to Virginia, and Declan was like, I want to buy a house. And I was like, oh, okay.
Bailey, talk to me about that. So the idea of home ownership has just always kind of felt far away for you.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, my family, we always rented. And, part of me knew it was never super stable. We were moving around a lot. I didn't like renting, but it was just what we always did. And I was never, taught a lot of the financial aspects of that. So when I became an adult, it just didn't register in my brain as something that would ever be possible for me. I was like, okay, this is what I grew up doing. This is what I'm always going to do. So I didn't even look into it. It was just too scary. It was too big of a thing.
You said like it was something that you thought like, oh, that's just like a rich people thing.
Yeah.
Like, let's not even give that a second thought.
Exactly. Yeah. Buying a home was always just for the super rich. And I was like, well.
Okay. Boy, there's a million rabbit holes I could go down with that one, but you brought up something interesting. You said that it was what you grew up with and just what you knew, but even at a young age, you noticed there was a lack of control, having to switch places a lot. Was that one of the attractions of looking into this and actually just listening to Declan a little bit when he said, hey, we should try this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The stability of it and just the idea of having a home that we would stay at for, years at least, and a place where we could build memories and build a life and not have to pack up every other year. It was definitely one of the most appealing parts of the process.
That's incredible. Okay, let's get into the nitty gritty. Now, I know that, Declan, you reached out to me a little early, and it was a few years that we were kind of going back and forth working on your planning, right? Or were you just listening to the podcast and following up on your research?
I kind of listened to the podcast, I would say like in phases. Like I would be, So like I was in grad school for a long time. I just finished at the end of 2023. And then we moved to Virginia in 2024. I started my first real job. So during grad school, I kind of knew that, okay, well, not that it would be impossible, but I knew I wasn't going to be staying in the area. So I was like, let me just kind of gain some knowledge about this so that later on when, I and like now we, or when we're ready for this, we can just hit the ground running. I basically had like a 6-month timeline since, okay, reach out, get in touch with the realtor, and then assumed it would be about 6 months before we could buy.
And did you stick to that? Did that timeline come to fruition, or did it adjust as life often does?
It was about half that.
Yeah, it went way faster than we thought it would.
3 months.
Was it due to ignorance, which as you know on my podcast is not a dirty word? Was it due to ignorance and just not realizing that you were in a better position than you thought, or there were programs for you, or had you crazy over-prepared?
I think it's really just that the house that we wanted popped up and we were ready for it. So we just decided, okay, let's do it. I think in an ideal world, we would have timed it to where buying a house lined up perfectly with the end of our lease, but it didn't work out that way. And, that was something we had to talk about. Are we okay with paying rent for a couple months if we can't find somebody else to take over our lease?
What was the final result of that? Did you get a subletter? Did you have to pay a fee? How did you deal with a lease that didn't line up with your move?
So I think the way we calculated it out, it made more sense to just wait till the end of the lease, just pay the last couple months of rent. We weren't able to find anybody else to take it over, but instead of just like paying the buyout fee, it made sense to just finish out the lease, just, clear everything out and move and just pay out the rent and then be done with it. So it hurt a little bit, but we worked it out to where we weren't going to be like in a bad situation if we weren't able to find a sublet.
One of the things I tell people all the time too is that you do get a little bit of a buffer when you start your mortgage, because you don't pay your first mortgage until you've lived in the home for 30 days, and you pay the first part of whatever the partial month is as part of your closing costs. So sometimes you don't actually have a payment for 6-7 weeks. But for you, what were those things that drove you to say, we're going to do this, to make you look at that option of breaking the lease? What was the magic about this home?
For me, we had gone to a few open houses, and it was nice to like dream of ourselves in those houses. But it never really felt quite like urgent, like we need to be in this house, until we got to this one. And it was just a beautiful house. It was kind of everything that we had talked about for a long time, everything that we wanted. It was very cute. And as soon as we walked in, personally, I was like, this is the one. I want this house.
Yeah, we got home and Bailey was like, I need that kitchen. It's a beautiful kitchen.
We talk about wants and needs in real estate, but that's different when you say, I need that kitchen.
Well, you might have said want. I don't know. It felt like need, though, when you said it.
Yeah. Yes.
So the other thing I think was like the sellers it seemed like they really wanted to a quick close. And it's funny because then they kind of switched around on that and it seemed like they didn't want that. But initially it seemed like they wanted a quick close. And so we knew that we really liked it, that we were very interested in it, and we didn't want to lose out on that opportunity. So
it's a very interesting part in real estate. It's all about time and money. So you had to sacrifice a little bit of money and give them the time that they wanted so that you could get this home, which, like Bailey said, when she walked in, it just feels like, whoa, that's the one. And it is interesting because things can change. 1 minute, a seller's looking at multiple offers and saying, we're buying another home. And then suddenly you're 12 days into your contract period and their deal falls out. And now instead of wanting to be out in 20 days, they're asking you for another 60 or 90 days so they can get another home. So,
exactly. Yeah. I think
what happened with you guys?
Yeah. Yeah. So our realtor was great. Kate, who I think you've either had on the podcast before or you had another buyer who worked with Kate.
Kate's
great.
My Virginia unicorn crushing machine. And we have had other Kate buyers on the program. She's so great with you guys. So she gave you the inside scoop, what was going on?
Well, I was going to say that she was great, but I think that the seller's agent was maybe less experienced. So we're not quite sure like what the situation was with the sellers. It was kind of, I don't know. Honestly, it felt a little bit sketchy, but I think it was just because of the agent being inexperienced and maybe not really knowing how the game works. Who knows? But it was just a little bit, it was one of those things that it seemed like we should just trust our gut with this because they were asking for rent back and just with some different things in the negotiation process. I think we were kind of like, well, yeah, the money would be nice, like, but do we want to take on that risk and the potential headache of becoming landlords?
Which is really interesting because that was a flip-flop.
Yeah, the fact that they flip-flopped.
Yeah, because that was the exact opposite of how you thought going into it, right?
Oh yeah, they wanted a quick close, and we were like, okay, well, how soon can we make this happen? With our lease and everything. And then they were like, oh no, well, actually, can we wait like a couple or a few months? And I just didn't have a good feeling about it. No offense to them, but
yeah, we wanted to make it the least complicated that we could.
Maybe if we weren't first-time home buyers and we lived, in the area, we wouldn't feel as uncomfortable with it. But, we were living an hour plus away and obviously new to this whole process. So we wanted to avoid any potential headaches, worst case scenarios.
Yeah. Well, I've got news for you. When you sell this place and move, or if you decide to keep this place as a rental and move, it's even more complicated. The scary thing about it is the first-time homebuyer is the easiest. All the drama that happened on their end, was because when you're trying to sell and move at the same time, especially if you don't have someone experienced, all the more reason why you having a rock star like Kate, it felt sketchy, but I am sure that you were legally protected the whole time. And that's the key. And that's why having your representation as someone who's experienced as opposed to just someone opening doors for you is so important, because it does happen where you get into a deal and things completely change. I tell people all the time, like, the minute you get that offer accepted, get ready. It's a part-time job. And it's because anything can happen like that. It's one seller selling one home one time, and who knows who they got to represent them. And, I have so many times where I've had the conversation with the clients, just like you did, where I'm like, okay, this feels super sketchy, but it's not. It's just that the other agent, well, let's just say they're not seasoned, because I don't want to rag on them completely. But a lot of times it's great, because if you have a good buyer's agent, they can kind of take control of the contract, and that ends up getting you better pieces. But how funny that you guys were all set to break your lease and be out of there, and then they asked for, extra months on top of it. Were there any other surprises about the process with you guys? I mean, I know you said that doing it from an hour away and as first-time home buyers, what were some things I hesitate to ask, but maybe like mistakes or learning moments, teachable moments that you can share with the homies out there?
I would say the biggest one is the appraisal, because we had a really unexpected situation. Even Kate, our realtor, was like, I have only seen this maybe once before. Our lender was surprised by it.
Yeah, so our home appraised for $29,000 less than the sales price. That's kind of crazy, and I didn't necessarily realize this at the beginning of the process, maybe because I assumed that the sale price would be close to the appraisal price. But the fact that if it appraises at a different price than the sale price, that the buyer has to bring that cash to the table. So, I didn't have an extra $30,000 laying around in cash. So that was a scary moment, or just kind of a disheartening moment, I guess, that, maybe we're not going to be able to get this house because the sellers don't seem to want to budge on their price. So what do we do?
Yeah, but that was another good thing about having a realtor like Kate, because she was so communicative, and she really had our back. She was very supportive. We went through a reappraisal process. And unfortunately, it just came back the exact same. But we learned about how that how the appraisal process works, and how comps are chosen. And we got to be, a part of that process of, looking at other properties in the area and doing those comparisons. Mm-hmm. And then we learned about negotiation and how to talk to the sellers and decide on some sort of compromise.
Yeah. Well, and Kate was the one who was doing that negotiation on our behalf. Mm-hmm. But yeah, learning about our options, and then throughout all of this, also talking to our lender. I can think of many times that I was on the phone with him, 10 p.m. or something on a weeknight, like just going through spreadsheets and, what if we get this down payment assistance grant, this mortgage option, looking at all the different scenarios and playing them out to see how we could make it work, basically. And ultimately what happened is the sellers were able to meet us in the middle. And then we did get down payment assistance. There was an interest rate reduction program that really helped us make it happen. All those things, put together.
I have so many questions. I want to take the last 3 minutes and make an hour-long podcast about it. It's so educational for people. Let's start at the back and go backwards at the end. What kind of down payment were you guys using originally before the down payment assistance? Were you at 3%, 5%, 10%? Where were you?
We were going with, I believe, a 3% down payment.
So you were on the low down payment conventional loan. So you had the 3%. You didn't have $30,000 in your wallet hanging out when the appraisal came through. The lender is such an important part of that reappraisal process. again, I could go into this for hours, but the appraisal is something that is actually generated by the lender. And I've been in Kate's shoes. We walk in assuming that, we know if we've overpaid for a home and we're going to run into an appraisal issue, but because we've all done the research together before we've gone for a home. But you do have that time. Unfortunately, it's one of those things that makes no sense, especially to first-time home buyers. The appraiser, someone who comes out and makes a couple $100, they set the value for the entire $400 and something thousand transaction. It makes no sense. Welcome to the world of real estate. But that's awesome. You guys got to go through the reappraisal process, which probably gave you the confidence and understanding that figuring out what you needed to do to make it work was important. More importantly, it gave the sellers the understanding that, okay, we're here. These guys don't have the cash. They then have an option. Do they want to start completely over, get you guys out of the contract and have to start over while they've already been shuffling once or twice on their end? The incentive for them to compromise becomes a lot bigger. I try not to say this too often as I'm speaking into a microphone that goes all over the world. You have a little bit of the advantage as the buyer if you know the seller would rather close this with you and have the cash so they could buy another home. And Kate knows that. Your lender knows that. And you did what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of times it's not buyer comes up with a period. Most of the time it's meet in the middle. Had you looked into the down payment assistance program ahead of time? Or was that something that came up when the appraisal bomb happened?
No, we had looked at a down payment assistance ahead of time. We looked at different scenarios, like kind of across the board with Mark. I'd talked to at least one other lender just to kind of do my research. So yeah, we ran through, like I said, so many different spreadsheets to see what would work. And then when the appraisal came back, that kind of threw us for a loop. And we went back to, okay, well, let's look at some more spreadsheets. And I think it's all about, just without getting too much into the nitty gritty of it, I think it's about finding what you qualify for in your area and what programs can stack and which ones can't.
Say that again. They can stack, right, Declan?
Yes. Some things can stack. Always read the fine print. If you have to take a homebuyer education course and or do a financial counseling session or write a letter or whatever you have to do to get that assistance, those things are definitely worth it.
Okay, now I know what you meant there. You're saying that for some of them, you're required to take some sort of course in order to get the grant, correct?
Correct, yeah. So in order to get I believe this was for the down payment assistance grant, we had to do a homebuyer education course. We were able to do it online, which was great. I think we just took a couple evenings, just opened up a beverage, sat down on the couch, and just made it a fun thing. And, we actually learned, Bailey, you were just saying before this that course, like, you found it really helpful.
Yeah, I could see, like, at first I was like, oh, this is going to be silly. But then it really was informative. And I felt like, Declan had already done so much research beforehand, but I could imagine a scenario of first-time home buyers who maybe weren't as diligent about it, finding that course like really, really useful, actually.
Well, I'm assuming that Declan is incredibly diligent because he said the word spreadsheet at least a dozen times so far. I kind of got the vibe that he did the work. But Bailey, you got to let me know, who was more entertaining, the podcast or the class?
Oh, the podcast, of course.
Okay, cool. Phew.
Yeah, the class was a little cheesy. We did a lot of just like making fun. A little skits.
Aren't those online classes the best?
But it was good.
A lot of people will come to me and say, I'm going to take this class, David. And I'm like, oh my God, just listen to these 8 episodes. I guarantee you're going to get more information out of it. But for you guys, stacking and then understanding the requirements, and you mentioned, what was the deal with the interest? And was there a special program that helped you with the mortgage interest rate?
Yeah, so it was, I believe it's a state program. So obviously it's going to vary depending on where people live, but There was one that reduced our interest rate by a percentage point, and we initially thought that that wouldn't be possible because we were buying in October, and our lender had told us that these specific funds tend to run out early in the year. It turned out that they did still have funds available, and all we needed to do was attend a financial counseling session, which the point we were at in the process, it was kind of, I thought it was kind of a little silly because it was kind of like, okay, here's how to make a budget. And it's like, we are already so far past, like, here's what a budget is. But, do whatever you have to do to get the money.
Yeah, oh, totally. You do what you got to do. But that's God bless all these programs out there. And I think they're wonderful. A lot of times the requirements that go with it are a little bit silly. But, those programs are under this false assumption that I'm living under, that people are going to reach out to me 2 years ahead of time, and then we can start their planning. The truth is, most people get right up to where they're ready to go out and start looking. They've been looking at homes on Zillow for a year. They're saving money on their own, and then they go to an open house and call someone and say, how do I buy this place? So they've already been budgeting. That's such an interesting thing. And for the listeners out there, I've heard two things about the unicorn lender that came through: a killer realtor who has, and I love the fact that you reached out to other people too, and talked to different people. But by going with a local mortgage professional, number one, you had people answering questions for you at 10 p.m. You had people answering all the time for you. You weren't calling into a call center like an online. And the local knowledge of understanding what kind of programs there are specifically to your state, your county, even your city or your municipality, and understanding that they might run out. I mean, that's awesome. You guys scored and you got it. So, wow. Do you guys ever look back at the whole thing and see all the puzzle pieces that fell into place for you and get excited about what you guys were able to pull off?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just going through these questions, I was looking back through my emails and like through our everything we signed on closing day, and I was like, okay, let me remind myself about all these little details. And yeah, definitely, it was a lot of it's definitely a group effort. I don't think it's something that somebody can just say, okay, I want to buy a home, let me just go do it. You really need to have other people who you trust and who are professionals at what they do. I think that's really what made it possible for us, and having, a partner who's in it with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you guys get to bounce off each other and, sometimes discussing and rediscussing things. One person retains one thing and one person retains another. Bailey, how sick of you were you of his spreadsheets, or did they help you?
It's a little bit of both. At certain points, I was like, I'm tired of hearing about the spreadsheets. I don't want to talk to Mark the lender today. But it was really helpful, and it made me feel more secure about the process. As stressful as the process was, I felt safe in the hands of people like our lender and like Kate and Declan, who was just always talking about it felt better than not talking about it enough.
That's great. I was on social media last night and I saw someone, it was really funny. They have like a desk pad, like a giant mouse pad. That's all the keyboard shortcuts for Excel to tell you how to do it. And I was like, the whole time you've been talking, I'm thinking this would be a great gift for Declan, although you probably know them all already. When you are someone who sets your budget ahead of time, when you are someone who looks at all the different factors, I'd love to tell you there's an easy single path. But because of that, like, you were able to take a gigantic monkey wrench of the $30,000 appraisal gap that had to be negotiated and just repunch it into your spreadsheet. And that's a kudos to you and a tribute to your preparation and being ready for that. So were there any other pieces of the home buying process that we haven't touched on that were surprising or scary or super fun or interesting for you guys? The home shopping, any of that stuff, the contract period besides the appraisal?
One thing I would say is that it was a little scary to try to find a house that ticked all of the boxes that we needed it to tick, because Declan works a little bit closer to DC, but we knew that if we wanted to buy closer to DC, that we would likely end up buying more of like a condo. But we wanted a yard. We wanted, a little bit more space. So we were looking further out because he is a federal employee who was working from home for a while.
Yeah, for the most part, working from home. That's all changing now, but we'll get back to that.
And then I'm a student as well, taking classes. So
Okay. So I'm curious, did you factor that in that you might be commuting at some point when you picked this location?
Yes. So I was going in 2 days every other week. That was the work arrangement that I had until recently. So when we were looking at homes, we said, okay, if we're going to move outside of the city, let's at least live near a commuter train so that that's an option for us. So now I'm very glad that we did that because federal employees are having to go back to the office full time. So, no problem. I mean, it's a longer commute, but, no problem because the train's there. So I'm not going to have to worry about traffic every day.
Yeah. I actually remember that in conversations along the way at one point when we were connecting you with the right team to help you, the commuter train. And plus, you can take your laptop and make all kinds of fun spreadsheets while you're on the train since you're not driving.
Or listen to podcasts,
Attaboy! I love it. For education and entertainment, either or.
Yep.
Whatever you've got, because I'm sure you've got something cooking next. So, Bailey, I interrupted you there, but you were, was that necessarily, did that feel like a compromise for you? Or was it kind of like, oh, well, this is going to work out because we like these areas as well?
Oh yeah, it was actually more in my favor because I'm not a city liver. I love being more in a rural area. But I prefer a rural area that has some civilization. And so we actually ended up finding the perfect little town. And as a student as well, I'm still in college at the moment, and the town that we live in is actually the same town that the University of Mary Washington is in. So that's perfect for me as well. Yeah.
You talked about the on again, off again planning Declan did about, being in grad school and Bailey, you're a student. I've been redoing this episode to the 10 steps to help people. And I was dropping in some old interviews and I think it's 187, maybe. She was a PhD and was in grad school. But because she was in grad school, she was doing all the saving and research on her own. And then she said, by the time she reached out to me, she's like, oh, I could have been planning this a lot differently if I was working with the team. So, but I think it's encouraging for students, even grad, because she was like, I was in grad school. I didn't have money to buy a house. I wasn't thinking about it, kind of like you put it on pause. But I think it's really exciting for people to hear that even as students, not only did you make your spreadsheets and make this plan, but what are you guys, 4 months into this house as homeowners? And I'm assuming that you're younger folks. Are you guys in your 20s?
So I am 30.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually 33, so a little bit older.
Wow. Okay. Well, you're doing great then. My God, that's incredible. The average age of the first-time homebuyer last year was 38. You have beat the curve. I was just doing school math and thinking maybe you were in your late 20s, but being that far ahead of the curve is going to put you guys in a great situation. How hard was the biting the bullet between the rent payment and the mortgage payment?
It was not fun. I will say that I think one of the most stressful parts of the process was just the timing of it for us, because it was like a lot of big life changes happening, for me, finishing school, starting work, and then for Bailey kind of doing the opposite, trying to get out of like the industry that you're in and going back to school.
Mm-hmm.
So just sort of trying to buy a home and moving.
Yeah, but what's great about the spreadsheets and the fact that Declan loves them so much is we were able to really look at the extra expenses of owning a home, because it's not, just you're not going from just the rent price to the mortgage price. You're also going to, okay, we're going to have to pay for repairs. We're going to have to pay for upkeep, like all these little hidden costs that you might not expect. We really tried to prepare for those in our budget too.
And we looked at like this, what you were saying just reminded me that, we were like, okay, if we wait another year, if we stay in this apartment, even if rent stays the same, we're going to be paying another, $30,000 plus just to stay where we are. And when I looked at it like that, I was like, it just doesn't make sense to stay here and kind of, wait for things to change in the market or whatnot. It just made sense to make the move.
And I always tell people, don't go crazy at your spreadsheet, because right now, unfortunately, yes, your monthly payment is going to most likely be higher. That's just where we are right now. But I'm so glad that your spreadsheet had many, many, many columns. You saw that $30,000. And in October, make sure you pull out that spreadsheet again and look at your home's value in comparison, because you not only have the $30,000, but you have that $30,000 now being put towards something, $30,000 plus with the new payment. And it's into a forced savings account, into an asset that's going to be rising. Because I'm telling you, Monday morning after the Super Bowl here, I know it's going to blow up. And that's just so incredible. There are people that we never try to time the market, because it's your time in the market is always going to make you more money than trying to time the market. Where we're at right now is the inventory's low and things are appreciating. So your best time as a first-time home buyer was yesterday. And a lot of people will get scared because of what you described was going on in your life. That's crazy. One finishing and starting a gig, and one leaving a gig and going back to school, and moving and packing 4 months in. As a lifelong renter with your family renting, do you feel like this decision is becoming more comfortable and more settling because of the stability and the control of being a homeowner now?
Oh, absolutely. I have, a space, like Declan said, like we're making one of our rooms into an office where I feel like I can do work. I feel comfortable in my space, which is a big thing for me, because renting our whole lives and moving around from place to place, it was like we never really had somewhere where I felt totally comfortable, that felt like my space. And so having a home now, it's kind of like everything is coming together the way that it should.
And just like I tell you guys when you're shopping for homes, that the more preparation you do, the more options you'll have as a home buyer. What I just heard from you, Bailey, is because you've ended this generational lifelong cycle of renting, you now have more options for your life. And you've got the Bailey room that you can paint whatever dang color you want to. And your rent's not going to go up $750, or no one's going to sell the apartment building.
Absolutely. Yeah. It feels so stable and secure, and it's amazing.
Your story is, you guys, this is incredible, amazing. I really appreciate the time. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this. There's so many pieces of the puzzle, from the nitty gritty to, oh my God, what happens when it's a low appraisal, to figuring out where you are with commutes and the overall stability this brings. So thank you guys so much. I'm glad that your unicorn team worked out for you. And thanks. I appreciate having you guys on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you
for
so
having
much.
us.
Thanks for having the podcast. So Declan had something to listen to.
Yes.
So we could buy a house.
Well, it's important that over researchers are my friend. As a nerd who drinks and eats and sleeps this stuff 24/7, I love to just grab my microphone and give some actual real world advice that people can follow. And not to mention, it's super fun matchmaking out there. Kate's crushing it. So congratulations, guys. Thanks for coming on. Just incredible. Once again, I want to thank Declan and Bailey for taking the time to share their story. So many valuable pieces in there. So many things that you can learn that can help you understand this journey is possible for you. If you want to hear more stories like this, there's tons of interviews in the back catalog. Of course, you can always check us out on the YouTube channel, How to Buy a Home. And of course, as always, with your own questions, go to howtobuyahome.com. Ask David. We'll get you on your journey. Hey, Bailey thought this was just something that rich people did. And now she owns a home. Guess what? You can too. You can do this.
Looking for more DIY education or your own personal step-by-step guidance through the home buying journey? Since 2019, How to Buy a Home has been the #1 resource for first-time home buyers. So visit howtobuyahome.com to get started.